Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. This is Yunus Khan and I am here with the new topic of biology from the syllabus of class second year. We are going to discuss oxygen transport today. That is our topic. Then after that, carbon dioxide transport will be discussed. I would try my best to make the topic simple for you people, to simplify it, to make the concept simple for you people, so that you will be able to take the concept of the topic. The topic is important topic and has a little bit complication in this as well as in the transport of carbon dioxide. So I would try my best to make the things simple. Dear students, before going into the transport of the oxygen through blood, I would like to make some of other things to make that clear to you people. That is the plan, that is circuit plan, whether it is double circuit plan or single circuit plan. Then the partial pressure will be discussed. This is a very important thing which is going to be discussed over here again and again. Then difference of the partial pressures of oxygen. We will not touch the carbon dioxide because that is not concerned here. The carbon dioxide partial pressures and their transport will be discussed in the next lecture, inshallah. Then after that, we will, if these things are clear to you people, then you will be able to study the transport of oxygen. How that transport then takes place, we will discuss that. And then at the last, how the oxygen is released after transport. How that oxygen is packed up by the blood and how that is released to different tissues. Okay, so first of all, coming toward the plan, the circuit plan. In first year class, I think you people must have studied that there are two kind of circuit plans in all kind of animals. One is single circuit plan, as has been mentioned in the fishes. Single circuit plan is that kind of circuit plan in which the blood leaves the heart, covers whole of the body and then comes to the heart. So the blood leaving the heart is covering whole of the body in a single path, or in a single circuit. Therefore, that is called a single circuit plan. In human beings, as we are concerned here with the transport of oxygen in human being, so the circuit plan in human beings is called double circuit plan. If here you people look at the diagram which have been drawn over here, this is the heart, for example. This is the right auricle, this is left auricle, right ventricle and left ventricle. These are the four chambers in the heart. What happens here? Once the blood enters the heart, that blood is pumped into the ventricles and then it leaves the heart. The blood is conveyed to the lungs for oxygenation. After oxygenation, this blood comes back into the heart, not going to rest of the parts of the body. It comes back to the heart and then again it is pumped out and the blood then goes to different parts of the body to transport the oxygen to those tissues, and then the oxygenated blood is brought back. Over here, a very important point, if you want to note, there is once the blood is pumped by the heart, that leaves and goes to the lungs for oxygenation and then comes back. One circuit is this one. That is the circuit in which the blood is passing through the lungs where oxygenation takes place. Then after that, the blood is pumped again and then the blood goes to different parts of the body, covers different parts of the body and then comes back to the heart. So this is the second circuit. So there are two ways, two circuits in which the blood leaves the heart and then comes back to the heart. So when two circuits or two paths are followed by the blood, this is called as double circuit plan. This is a little bit important with respect to the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So therefore, I wanted to make this concept clear first. So there is a double circuit plan in the body of human beings. You have to note it. It is a very important question for the students of class first year as well. And if you people are going to appear in the entry test tests, so then this question will help you. That the human body has a double circuit plan. Their circuit plan now, another question which can be made over here. Their circuit plan which leaves the heart and through which oxygenation takes place, and crossing the lungs, passing the lungs, the blood comes back. This circuit is called as pulmonary circuit. Pulmonary means related to lungs. So this is a circuit in which lungs are covered, and that circuit in which rest of all the body parts are covered, and then blood comes back to the heart. That circuit is called as systemic circuit. So another very important question, that is what the human body contains two circuits, out of which one is pulmonary circuit and the other one is systemic circuit. Is that clear now? Next is the partial pressure. Another thing which is very important regarding this topic, which is related to this topic, that is the oxygen, that is the partial pressure. Partial pressure is what? Partial means half or a part of something. So for example, if we have a beaker or any container, there are, say for example, there are different kind of gas molecules inside this container. Say a gas molecule A, gas molecule B, gas molecule C, gas molecule D. There are 4 kinds of gases over here inside this container. So all the pressure exerted by all these gas molecules is called the total pressure of the gas. The pressure exerted by all of these gas molecules against the walls of the container or against the other molecules, that total pressure is called as total pressure of the container. But if we talk about one of these gas molecules, say for example about gas A, so the pressure exerted by gas A is its partial pressure out of their total pressure being exerted by the gas molecules. So similar is the case with the B, C and D. So each gas molecule exerts its own pressure. For example, there are 4 gas molecules and the total pressure is 100%, for example. So this means that each and every gas molecule exerts 25% gas pressure, or you may say that this may exert 20%, this may exert 30%, this may exert 10%, this may exert 40%. So the total pressure would become what? That would become 100%. So the individual pressure which is exerted by this individual gas is called its partial pressure. This means the pressure exerted by all of the gas molecules, that is called as total pressure. That is total pressure of the system or total pressure of the gas. Now this gas contains a number of kinds of gas molecules. Say for example, we are talking about A. So the pressure exerted by A is its partial pressure. Then it is called as partial pressure. So partial pressure is what? Partial pressure is the pressure exerted by an individual gas molecule, that is our liquid molecule, etc. So the individual pressure exerted by this molecule is called as its partial pressure. So now we can calculate the total pressure from the partial pressure. If you want to calculate the total pressure and if you have the partial pressures, then the partial pressure of A plus pressure of B plus pressure of C, similarly plus pressure of D is equal to total pressure. That can be mathematically calculated in this way. And if you have the total pressure, for example, and these 3 gas molecules partial pressure, then the partial pressure of gas A can be calculated by you easily. So in this way, this is the equation, mathematical equation with the help of which we can calculate the total pressure from the partial pressures or one of the partial pressure of the gas molecule from rest of that element. So partial pressure is what? Partial pressure. The second thing which have to be discussed over here, and that is very important over here, partial pressure is the pressure exerted by the individual gas molecule. Individual gas molecule present in the whole system or present in the mixture of all these gas molecules. Their individual pressure is called as its partial pressure. So this is about the partial pressure. Now here we will talk about the difference of partial pressure of oxygens. Again, I would like to talk about the partial pressure. Here, when we inhale the gas, when we inhale the air, This air contains a number of different gas molecules. It contains oxygen, nitrogen, it contains some of the carbon dioxides, it contains vapor molecules, etc. So this is a mixture which is being inhaled by us. A mixture is being inhaled by us. Okay, and you people must be aware. You people must be aware of that inhaled air. The inhaled air contains 21% of the oxygen. 21% of oxygen is there in the inhaled air. This has been discussed in the previous topics. So if the inhaled air contains 21% of the oxygen, this mean out of that whole mixture of the gases being inhaled, out of that whole mixture, this is, say for example, oxygen now. This A is oxygen, O2 molecule now. So out of that whole mixture which has been inhaled by us, the oxygen is 21%. The oxygen present in that inhaled air is 21%. So from this whole mixture and having the value of oxygen as 21%, we can calculate the partial pressure of oxygen in millimeter of mercury. So how can we calculate it? That can be calculated. The pressure exerted by the atmospheric air, that is 760 millimeter of mercury. That is 760 millimeter of mercury. Outside the pressure is 1 atmospheric, or that is 760 millimeter of mercury. You can consult the chemistry and physics for that why is it 760 millimeter of mercury. You will not go into such details, otherwise much of the time will be wasted. Okay, so as the pressure outside our body is 760 millimeter of mercury, and the air from this atmosphere which is being inhaled, that air contains 21%. Means this is that inhaled air whose partial pressure is 760 millimeter of mercury, whose partial pressure is 760 millimeter of mercury. Out of that mixture, whose pressure is this one, out of that mixture, oxygen is one of the constituent. Oxygen is 21%. If oxygen is 21%, this means this whole mixture is considered as 100%, out of which 21. For example, these are 100 molecules. This means there are 21 molecules of oxygen. So this means 21%, 21 divided by 100 is equal to 0.21. That is equal to 0.21. This 0.21 must be multiplied by 760. 0.21 multiplied by 760 millimeter of mercury. So if we multiply it by 760, it becomes 159 point something, 159.6 or 4 something, etc. Then if we take this 159 as 160 millimeter of mercury. So how this partial pressure of oxygen becomes 160 millimeter of mercury, that is calculated in this way. That is calculated over here in this way. We have taken the amount of oxygen in the whole mixture, and that the value of that oxygen is then multiplied with the total pressure exerted by the whole mixture or inhaled air, and as a result of which we got the value 160 millimeter of mercury. So in this way it becomes what? Say 160 millimeter of mercury. So this means the inhaling air is what? The air being inhaled is 160 millimeter of mercury. Here what is being discussed? I am going to discuss to make you people sure about the concept that there is a decrease in the partial pressure of oxygen. When this air enters the body, there is a gradual decrease in the partial pressure. So how that partial pressure is decreased? I would like to make that concept clear. Okay, so first of all, I have told you that 160 millimeter of mercury of the inhaling air, of the oxygen in inhaling air is this one. Okay, the oxygen in inhaling air has 160 millimeter of mercury partial pressure. Okay, so now if you people look at this, this is a mixture containing four constituent of the gases. If we add another gas molecule and it becomes five gas molecules, then this means that the partial pressure of one of these molecules will be reduced, because first before the addition of that gas molecule we had four gas molecules. Now we have five gas molecules, so the five gas molecule exert now 100% pressure on the walls. So this means there would be a decrease in the number, moles and partial pressure of the concerned gas molecule. So over here, if you people look here to the traveling of the oxygen along the respiratory tract, what happens here? Here, when the oxygen in the inhaling air is traveled towards the lungs, here a number of vapors are added to the inhaling air. So because of this addition of water vapors to the inhaling air, it do what? It reduces the partial pressure of the oxygen from 160 to 112, then at last 104, but we take it as 100 millimeter of mercury. So as this inhaling air is passing through the respiratory tract, the partial pressure of oxygen becomes 112 through the respiratory tract, because some of the water vapors are added, some of the pressure is now exerted by the water vapors, then reaching the lungs, a lot of other water vapors have been added, and as a result of which the partial pressure of oxygen has been reduced from 160 to 112, and lastly to 104 or 100 millimeter of mercury simply. Okay, so how this decrease takes place? It is 160 becomes 112, then becomes 100 millimeter of mercury when the air reaches the lungs or the alveoli. So how this decrease takes place? I have told you that during this process, during the passage of air into the lungs, a number of water vapors are added to the inhaled air, because of which the partial pressure of the oxygen is reduced. The partial pressure of oxygen is reduced. So when the air reaches the lungs or alveoli, it becomes what? 100 millimeter of mercury. It becomes 100 millimeter of mercury. So I have told you that partial pressure is what? That concept is made clear. Then difference of oxygen of partial pressure of oxygen. How this difference takes place? How the partial pressure is reduced? How that is decreased? That has also been discussed. Okay. Now, if these things are clear, that what is circuit plan, and if you are clear about the partial pressure, and if you are clear about the difference of partial pressure of oxygen in between the inhaled air and the air present in the lungs or alveoli, if these things are clear, then now we will be able to talk about our concerned topic, that is transport of oxygen. Okay, before going into the transport of oxygen, one thing which I would like to talk about, that is a very important factor, a very important protein which is being used here in the transport, that is hemoglobin. And hemoglobin has been fully discussed in the previous topic. I will not touch hemoglobin over here, because most of the information have been given by me in that lecture. You people have to consult that lecture to make the hemoglobin clear perfectly. That must be clear by you people. If that concept is clear, then you will be able to discuss to make the transport of oxygen clear over here. Okay, so hemoglobin is a very important factor over here, but that has been discussed, and I would not like to go into the discussion of the hemoglobin to avoid the wastage of time. Okay, otherwise most of the time will be wasted and our video will be lengthened. Okay, so we will not touch the hemoglobin. If you want to study about the hemoglobin, a lot of information have been given by me in that lecture. Title is hemoglobin, so you can study that. Okay, now here we are going to talk about the transport of oxygen. transport of oxygen. Okay, so now here if you look at the partial pressure of oxygen, that is 100 millimeter of mercury over here, and we usually study that this partial pressure become decreased further again when the oxygen leaves the lungs and it enters into the arterial blood, and that is then transported to the heart and then to the different kind of tissues. This partial pressure of oxygen is decreased, and again when the tissues are crossed and the blood returns back to the venous pathway to the heart and then to the lungs, a lot of decrease in the partial pressure is seen here. So again there is a decrease. How this decrease takes place? There is a transport of oxygen. This means there is a transport of oxygen, and there is a phenomena through which the oxygen is conveyed to different kind of tissues. So what happens here? In the arterial blood, the partial pressure of oxygen is decreased. Why? Here what happens? We have discussed in the previous topics that the oxygen is diffused out in the blood capillaries during exchange of gases. During exchange of gases, this oxygen is given to the blood. This oxygen is given to the blood by a special process which is called as diffusion. A special process which is called as diffusion. Through diffusion, the oxygen concentration is very high over here, and the oxygen concentration in the incoming deoxygenated blood is very low. So what happens? This oxygen is diffused from this high concentration into the low concentration, means into the capillaries or into the blood. When this oxygen is brought into the blood, what happens? Two things happens. One is the some other molecules are added, because of which the partial pressure is reduced to 97 millimeter of mercury instead of 100 millimeter of mercury. One thing. Another one, some other parts are added to here, and different other deoxygenated blood can also be added sometimes, because of which this 100 millimeter of mercury partial pressure of the oxygen is reduced here to 97 millimeter of mercury. It is 97 over here as well. This is also artery. Okay, this is 97 millimeter of mercury here as well. Okay, so another very important question. A lot of questions have been discussed over here. You have to note these questions. That will help you in the entry test as well. Okay, so a lot of things have been discussed over here. Here another very important question, that the partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood, that is 97 millimeter of mercury, and that is 100 millimeter of mercury in the alveoli. That is 100 millimeter of mercury in the alveoli. When we talk about the venous blood, what happens? A lot of oxygen is conveyed to the tissues, and the partial pressure of oxygen is further reduced to 40 mm of mercury. 40 mm of mercury. So how this reduction takes place, we will discuss over here. For that, the oxygen transport of oxygen. Okay, so now I was going to talk about the diffusion. The oxygen is diffused. Now there is a very important phenomena through which this oxygen is transported from the lungs to the tissues. What is that phenomena? How that is transported to the tissues? For that, two things have to be discussed over here. And these two things are one is the hemoglobin and the other one is the blood. Means for that we have to talk about the blood. The blood contains two main parts. Remember, the blood contains two main parts. Plasma. About 55% of the blood is plasma, and about 45% portion of the plasma is blood cells. 45%. Out of these blood cells, we have a special kind of blood cell which is called as RBC. This RBC contains hemoglobin. Which have been discussed in the previous topic. Now this is the hemoglobin which can receive the oxygen and can carry it. How the hemoglobin receives it, we will discuss it over here. And other than that, another part of the blood is plasma that receives the oxygen and that is carried to the different parts of the blood. So there are two ways through which the transport of oxygen transport takes place from the lungs to heart and then to the rest of the parts of the body. Okay, so we will discuss this transport, the two ways, that is through hemoglobin and through the plasma. And at last, very important, keep in mind, at last we will talk about the release of oxygen by the hemoglobin. When this oxygen reaches to the tissue, for example, this is the body tissue, for example, this is muscle, this is, for example, muscle. So when the blood reaches the muscle, how this oxygen is released by the hemoglobin and how that oxygen is given to the tissues or tissue cells. So we will talk about that. So before that, we have to discuss the transport of oxygen through hemoglobin and through plasma. Here is a very important question. Keep it in mind that the transport of oxygen takes place through hemoglobin about 97 to 98%. Some say 98.5%. Okay, but your book says that it is 97%. And the transport of oxygen through plasma, is 3% according to your text. But in certain books, it is said that it is 1.5 to 2%. So it is what, 1.5 to 2% or 3% according to your textbook. Okay, and it is 97% according to your textbook by the hemoglobin, or 98 or 98.5% to other views. Okay, so means that a lot of oxygen is transported by the hemoglobin and a very small amount of the oxygen is transported to the plasma. Okay, because there is a very low amount of oxygen being dissolved in the plasma and rest of the oxygen is taken up by the hemoglobin. How this oxygen is taken up by the hemoglobin? First of all, we have to talk about the oxygen which is taken up by the hemoglobin. We will talk about the picking up of the oxygen by the hemoglobin and plasma. Then we will take this oxygen to the tissues and it's handing over to the tissues over there. Okay, so we are going to talk about the picking up of the oxygen. So the oxygen is picked up by the blood in the form of dissolution in plasma or in the form of oxyhemoglobin. So how that takes place? First of coming towards that. So first of all, talking about the hemoglobin, how the hemoglobin reacts with the oxygen, how the hemoglobin picks the oxygen. So in previous lecture, I have told you that this hemoglobin contains 4 globin chains and 4 heme parts. It contains 4 heme parts. Each heme part contains an iron which is in +2 state. This iron receive what? An oxygen molecule. So a hemoglobin contains 4 heme parts. This means 4 iron. So this means 4 oxygen molecules must be taken up by the hemoglobin. 4 oxygen molecules must be taken up by the hemoglobin and that will be shifted to the tissues. Okay, when the hemoglobin receives 4 oxygen molecules, it becomes Hb4O2, or sometimes it is said it becomes HbO8. HbO8, because there are 4 oxygen molecules or 8 oxygen atoms. So this form of the hemoglobin, to which 4 oxygen molecules or 8 oxygen atoms have been added, this form is called as oxyhemoglobin. That is called as oxyhemoglobin. This phenomena is followed in the presence of a special kind of enzyme which is called as carbonic anhydrase. Carbonic anhydrase enzyme is used here because in the presence of which hemoglobin receives 4 oxygen molecule. For example, look at this. This is, for example, this hemoglobin. Hemoglobin receives 4 oxygen molecules, and this hemoglobin carries it. Another very best example which I would like to give you, that is in the form of a bus. This is a bus. Look at this. This is a bus. Say, for example, this bus is a hemoglobin. This bus is a hemoglobin. And this bus or hemoglobin contains 4 seats. 1, 2, 3, and 4. For example, this bus contains 4 seats. Each seat is what? Each seat is an iron. Inside this hemoglobin, there are 4 irons. Okay? Each seat is an iron, means a heme part. It is an iron or a heme part. So what happens if this has 4 seats? This means four people can get into the bus and they can take a seat. Okay, so this means this one oxygen molecule, another oxygen, another oxygen, another 4 oxygen molecules are taken by the 4 iron atoms of the hemoglobin, and this bus didn't do what? When this blood goes, this means this hemoglobin is shifted, conveyed along with the blood to the heart, and then from the heart to the tissues. So the bus, that is hemoglobin, into the blood takes 4 oxygen molecules and that is shifted to the tissues. Before going into the release of oxygen to the tissues, one important thing have to be discussed over here, and that is also mentioned in the previous topic. That is, I have told you that what happens. Say for example, this is the heme part. The heme part contains 4 pyrrole rings, at the center of which there is an iron group. So if you flip this heme part like this, so the central iron atom contains a histidine and globin chain, and above it is the oxygen. So the oxygen is attached just at the center to the iron. Just at the center to the iron. And I have told you that the iron is in +2 state. When the oxygen comes and is attached to it, the oxygen is most electronegative atom. It receives another electron and it becomes a ferric. It becomes +3 state. The iron comes into +3 state. So a very important thing which have been discussed in the previous topic as well, that is what? That is the hemoglobin contains 4 heme parts. So when first oxygen is added to one of the 4 irons, when the first oxygen is added to one of the 4 iron parts, what happens? There is a conformational change. The iron is hanging a little bit downward from the level or plane of the heme part, okay, from the level of that. When oxygen is added, it is pushed up a little bit, and then there is a change in the hemoglobin. So this do what? This increases the affinity of oxygen into the rest of the irons of the hemoglobin. So when the first oxygen is added, second oxygen will be taken very easily. When 2 oxygens are added, the third one will be taken very easily, and when 3 are added, fourth one will be taken more easily. So in this way, the addition of oxygen increases the affinity of the hemoglobin for oxygen. So this must be kept in mind. This is very important. This is very important question for you people regarding your anti-test. That hemoglobin contains 4 iron atoms. It can receive 4 oxygen molecules. When the first oxygen is added, it is being added a little bit in difficulty. When it is added, rest of the oxygen atoms are added easily. They are added easily because the first oxygen atom increases the affinity of hemoglobin for the oxygen. That increases the affinity of the hemoglobin for the oxygen. So one is what? That is the picking up of oxygen by the hemoglobin. Another thing is the plasma. Another thing, that is the plasma. The plasma do what? Plasma is the fluid part of the blood, and it takes up the oxygen in dissolved form. Takes up the oxygen in dissolved form. So about 2 to 3% of the oxygen is dissolved in plasma, and 97 to 98% of the oxygen is taken up by the hemoglobin. And in this way, this oxygen is taken by the blood plasma and hemoglobin. Taken up by the blood plasma and hemoglobin, and that is brought by the blood into the heart, which is then pumped by the ventricle to the rest of the parts of the body. When the blood reaches, say for example, the blood has been reached over here. So what happens here? This is that bus which have been reached here. This is the bus which have been reached over here. Okay. So what happens here? Here there are 4 seats and 4 oxygen atoms, 4 oxygen molecules. Another very important concept regarding this example. If this bus has 4 seats and if there are 4 men sitting on these seats, so if you want to add another person, when another person want to get into the car or into the bird, what would have, there must be a release of the one oxygen molecule. There must be a release of one oxygen molecule. This is, for example, bus. It has 4 passengers. So these 4 passengers are having all of the seats. If you want to take another passenger, and when he gets into the bus, what would happen? One of these passengers must be taken out. One of them must be gotten out. So if this one comes in, this passenger must be gotten out. This must get out. Okay, so how this takes place? This is what this passenger is. What this is carbon dioxide. So over here, what happens when the oxygen in the form of oxyhemoglobin and in the dissolved form of blood plasma, when that is reached to the tissues, here what happens? Here in the tissues, a special kind of process takes place, which is called as respiration. Here, the glucose C6H12O6 has been already oxidized, resulting in the formation of carbon dioxide plus water. This carbon dioxide, which is produced as a result of this process, this has been accumulated here. This carbon dioxide is accumulated here. This carbon dioxide from this high concentration will diffuse out into the blood. How this takes place, we will discuss later into the transport of carbon dioxide. Okay, but you have to keep in mind that carbon dioxide has been diffused into the blood. When this is diffused into the blood, what would happen? It will react to the hemoglobin. Same like the reaction of oxygen with the hemoglobin. As the oxygen reacts with the hemoglobin, similarly carbon dioxide can also react, and it forms carbamino hemoglobin, not carboxyhemoglobin. Keep it in mind. There is a very important thing to be made clear. Okay, to be made clear, this is very important. A lot of students are confused about the carboxyhemoglobin and carbaminohemoglobin. The attachment of carbon dioxide to the hemoglobin results in the formation of carbaminohemoglobin. That is not carboxyhemoglobin. Carboxyhemoglobin is something else. Anyhow, leave it. We will discuss in the next topic, that is transport of carbon dioxide. So when this carbon dioxide comes here, it will try to enter the hemoglobin. It will try to react with the hemoglobin. When it reacts with the hemoglobin, the oxygen is released. When this oxygen is released, what happens? The oxygen is given to the tissues. When the oxygen is released, here the concentration of oxygen will be increased in the blood and diffusion will take place here. So our last part of the question is oxygen released by the hemoglobin. How this oxygen release takes place? This oxygen release takes place by the effect of carbon dioxide concentration, or by the decrease in pH. How that takes place, we will discuss in the next video in the transport of carbon dioxide. So the increase in carbon dioxide concentration or decrease in the pH means increase in acidity. Do what? It releases the oxygen from the hemoglobin. It unloads the oxygen from the hemoglobin, and that oxygen is then given to the tissues. Here what happens? A special effect is shown over here. This release of oxygen by the use of carbon dioxide or by the use of protons is called as Bohr's effect. What is Bohr's effect? We will discuss this Bohr's effect, and one is Haldane effect, which is shown over here in the lungs. Haldane effect is the release of carbon dioxide here, and Bohr's effect is the release of oxygen over here. So this is called Bohr's effect, and that will be discussed in detail in a separate video. I would try my best to make a separate video on Bohr's effect and Haldane effect, so then you people will be able to be clear about that. Okay, so this is about the taking up of oxygen, transport of oxygen, and then release of the oxygen from the hemoglobin. So this is the oxygen release from the hemoglobin, and the oxygen which have been taken up by the plasma in dissolved form, that is already in dissolved form in high concentration here in the blood, that is given to the tissues where the oxygen concentration is low. So in this way, the oxygen of plasma in dissolved form and the oxygen of hemoglobin in the form of oxyhemoglobin, what happens? That oxygen is given to the tissues, and in reverse, carbon dioxide is taken up, then carbon dioxide is shifted. So what happens here? If you look at the if you look at the amount of oxygen per 100 ml, in the previous topic I have told in hemoglobin that each 100 ml of blood contains 20 ml of the oxygen on the arterial side. On the venous side, the amount of oxygen, is 15, that is 15 ml. The amount of oxygen is 15 ml per 100. So it is 20 ml here and 15 here. What happened here? 20 minus 5 minus 15, 5 ml of oxygen have been disappeared, just crossing the tissues. Where did that oxygen go? Where did that 5 ml of oxygen go? That 5 ml of oxygen is given to the tissues here. So this is the oxygen which is given to the tissues, and that is shown here in a decreased form. 5 ml is decreased here. Here the amount of oxygen is 20 ml and here it is 15 ml. You must have studied sometimes. This is normally not shown 20 ml. It is normally when the blood is 100% saturated. When the blood is 100% saturated, it is 20 ml. And if it becomes 15 ml, it becomes 75% saturated. Look at the percentage. If it is 20%, then it is 100% saturated. And if it becomes 15 ml, this means it is 75% saturated. This means this blood has the capacity now to take 25% more oxygen, and that takes place here in the lungs when it is brought here. Okay, but normally it is not, due to some reasons. We would not go into so much explanations because the lecture will be too much lengthy then. Okay, so due to certain reasons, this is not 20 ml, this becomes 19.4 ml per 100 ml. And in this way, on this side, it is not 15 ml, it becomes 14.4 ml per 100 ml of the blood. So you have to note all these arithmetics, all these values have to be noted by you people. All these are separate, each and everyone have a separate MCQ, a separate question which will help you in the entities as well as in your examinations. So this is about the different things I have discussed. Circle plants, pulmonary and systemic circle plants, then partial pressures have been discussed in detail. Then after that, how the decrease or difference in the partial pressures of oxygen takes place, that have been discussed. Why that takes place, that have been discussed. Then transport of oxygen, how that takes place through the hemoglobin. Each hemoglobin takes 4 oxygen molecules because it has 4 heme parts, and in the form of the plasma, dissolved form, that is transported. Then release of oxygen from the hemoglobin. Release of oxygen takes place here. How? Carbon dioxide comes, or protons comes into to get into the blood or hemoglobin. Then the oxygens are released. This carbon dioxide, the entry of a carbon dioxide or protons, we will discuss in the transport of carbon dioxide. So this entry of carbon dioxide or protons into the hemoglobin unloads the oxygen from the hemoglobin, and that oxygen then given to the tissues. And rest of the blood which is coming back to the heart and to the lungs, that now is called as deoxygenated, and it is shown blue. The blue portion is called is shown as deoxygenated blood, and this red portion, this contains a blood which is oxygenated blood. Okay, this is oxygenated blood, and here this is a deoxygenated blood. So this is about the whole story of the oxygen transport in the blood, how that oxygen transport takes place. The video is a little bit lengthy, but this is very important. I wanted to make all the things clear. I think inshallah each and everything will be clear for you people now. All the concepts must be clear. Keep all these things in mind. There are a lot of confusions regarding different kind of lectures, video lectures, especially Indian lectures, etc. A lot of people are confused about a lot of things regarding this topic. Okay, so keep it in mind. If you people have any question, you can ask me in comments. I will try my best to give the answers of those. Okay, and next on previously, due to some reasons, I couldn't be able to give the lectures on daily basis. Now I am free, inshallah. I will try my best to give the lectures on daily basis. You people are especially invited to pray for me and especially make me strengthened to make the things clear. Until next video, thank you very much, and make all the things happy. uh, Keep struggles forward, and give me feedbacks, whether good or whether regarding your questions. I would like to give responses. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.